The Galactic Dominion had never lost a war. For 1,000 years, their empire had stretched across the stars, crushing every civilization that dared to resist them. Their fleets were invincible, their technology unmatched, their will unbreakable. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, and they knew it. When they came for humanity, they expected it to be just another conquest. They were wrong. The Dominion's armada arrived in the Sol system without warning, their ships blotting out the stars as they descended upon Earth. The human defense forces were outnumbered and outgunned, their outdated ships no match for the Dominion's advanced weaponry. The battle was over before it began. Earth fell in a matter of hours. The Dominion's high commander, a towering figure clad in gleaming black armor, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conqueror, and watched as the planet burned. Pathetic, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. They call themselves a civilization? They are nothing but insects scurrying beneath our feet. His second-in-command, a slender, reptilian creature with cold, calculating eyes, nodded in agreement. Their resistance was laughable. They barely put up a fight. The High Commander turned away from the view screen, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Send the order to the fleet. Burn their colonies to ash. Leave nothing alive. But the Dominion had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. In the ruins of a forgotten research facility on Mars, a small group of survivors gathered in the shadows. They were the last of humanity's scientists, engineers, and soldiers, those who had escaped the Dominion's purge. Among them was Captain Alex Drake, a former commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. His once pristine uniform was now torn and bloodied, his face gaunt and pale, but his eyes burned with a fire that refused to die. "They think we're beaten," he said, his voice low and steady as he addressed the group. "They think we're broken. But we're not. We're still here. And we're going to make them pay." The others nodded, their faces grim but determined. They had been working for months, scavenging whatever they could from the wreckage of human and Dominion ships alike. The Dominion had left behind a graveyard of broken hulls and shattered weapons, confident that no one could ever make use of them. They were wrong. Drake led the group into the heart of the facility, where their project was taking shape. It was a ship, or what would become one. The skeleton of a dreadnought, pieced together from the remains of a dozen vessels, both human and alien. Its hull was a patchwork of scorched metal and salvaged plating, its engines a Frankensteinian amalgamation of Dominion technology and human ingenuity. "The Phoenix," Drake murmured, running a hand along the ship's jagged frame. "Our last hope." The Phoenix was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a weapon born of desperation, a testament to humanity's refusal to surrender. The engineers had taken the Dominion's own wreckage and turned it against them, reverse engineering their advanced technology and combining it with human designs. The result was a ship that was raw, unfinished, and utterly unpredictable. But it was also their only chance. As the crew worked tirelessly to prepare the Phoenix for launch, a transmission crackled over the facility's comms. It was faint, barely audible over the static, but the word sent a chill through Drake's spine. "This is the Resolute calling any human survivors. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. If anyone can hear this, we need." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only silence. Drake clenched his fists, his mind racing. The Resolute had been one of humanity's last colony ships, carrying thousands of civilians to safety. If the Dominion had found them. "We're out of time," he said, turning to his crew. "The Phoenix isn't ready, but we can't wait any longer. We launch now." The crew hesitated, their eyes flickering to the unfinished ship. It was a death trap, barely holding together, but they knew there was no other choice. As the Phoenix powered up for its maiden, and possibly final voyage, Drake took his place in the command chair. The ship shuddered and groaned, its patchwork hull straining under the stress of its own systems. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "We're the last of humanity. Let's make it count." The Phoenix launched into the void, a ragged, defiant scream against the darkness. The Dominion's fleet was waiting. They had detected the facility's activity and moved to crush this last spark of resistance. A dozen Dominion warships, sleek and deadly, surrounded the Phoenix, their weapons trained on the battered dreadnought. The High Commander's voice boomed over the comms, dripping with contempt. "You are the last of a dead species. Surrender and your deaths will be swift." Drake's lips curled into a grim smile. "We're not dead yet." He activated the Phoenix's experimental systems, a combination of human and Dominion technology that had never been tested. The ship's engines roared to life, its weapon systems humming with barely contained energy. The Dominion opened fire, their plasma cannons lighting up the void. The Phoenix moved. It was faster than anything its size had any right to be, dodging the barrage with a grace that defied its patchwork construction. Its weapons returned fire, a chaotic mix of human railguns and Dominion energy beams that tore through the enemy ships like paper. The Dominion's arrogance turned to shock as the Phoenix carved a path through their fleet, its crew fighting with a ferocity that left the aliens reeling. But the battle was far from over. As the Phoenix broke through the blockade, a new threat emerged. A Dominion dreadnought, larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced, loomed on the horizon. Drake's heart sank as he realized the truth. They were outmatched. The Dominion dreadnought loomed like a colossus in the void, its obsidian hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. It was a monstrosity of war, bristling with weapons that could reduce entire planets to ash. To the crew of the Phoenix, it was a nightmare made real. Captain Alex Drake stared at the behemoth on the viewscreen, his mind racing. The Phoenix had already taken a beating, its patchwork hull barely holding together after the skirmish with the Dominion fleet. Facing the dreadnought head-on was suicide, but retreat wasn't an option. Not with the Resolute still out there, carrying the last remnants of humanity. "We can't take it down with brute force," Drake said, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "We need to outthink them." Lieutenant Kara Voss, the Phoenix's tactical officer, nodded grimly. "Their shields are too strong for our railguns and their weapons outrange ours. But if we can get close enough, we might be able to hit them where it hurts." Drake's eyes narrowed. "Where's their weak spot?" Kara brought up a holographic schematic of the dreadnought, highlighting a section near its engines. "Here. Their power core is heavily shielded, but if we can bypass their defenses, a single well-placed shot could cripple them." "And how do we get close enough without getting blown to pieces?" asked Ensign Marcus Rios, the ship's pilot. Drake's lips curled into a grim smile. "We make them think we're running." The Phoenix pivoted sharply, its engines flaring as it turned away from the dreadnought. To the Dominion, it looked like a desperate attempt to flee. The dreadnought's commander, a ruthless warlord known as Vrax, sneered as he watched the human ship retreat. "Pathetic," he growled, his mandibles clicking in disdain. "They think they can escape us? Pursue them. I want that ship destroyed." The dreadnought surged forward, its massive engines propelling it through the void with terrifying speed. The Phoenix was fast, but the dreadnought was faster. "They're gaining on us," Rios reported, his hands gripping the controls tightly. "Hold course," Drake ordered. "Let them get closer." The Phoenix weaved through the wreckage of the earlier battle, its patchwork hull groaning under the strain. The dreadnought followed, its weapons charging as it prepared to deliver the killing blow. "They're locking on," Kara shouted. "Now!" Drake barked. Rios yanked the controls, sending the Phoenix into a sudden, gut-wrenching spin. The dreadnought's weapons fired, but the shots went wide, streaking past the human ship as it twisted out of the line of fire. "Bring us around," Drake ordered. "Target their power core." The Phoenix swung around, its hybrid cannons roaring to life. The dreadnought's shields flared as the energy blast slammed into them, but they held firm. "Their shields are too strong," Kara said, frustration creeping into her voice. Drake clenched his fists. "We need to get closer." The Phoenix dove toward the dreadnought, its engines screaming as it closed the distance. The dreadnought's weapons fired again, but the human ship's erratic movements made it a difficult target. "We're within range of their point defenses," Rios warned. "Hold steady," Drake said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We just need one shot." The Phoenix shuddered as the dreadnought's point defenses opened fire, their rapid-fire plasma bolts tearing into the human ship's hull. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and the air grew thick with the smell of burning circuitry. "Hull breach on deck 2, shouted Ensign Elena Torres, the ship's engineer. "We're losing power to the forward thrusters." "We're almost there," Drake said, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen. "Just a little closer." The dreadnought loomed ahead, its massive bulk filling the screen. The Phoenix's hybrid cannons charged, their energy building to a crescendo. Fire. The cannons unleashed their payload, a concentrated blast of energy that tore through the dreadnought's shields and slammed into its power core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dreadnought erupted in a blinding explosion, its shattered remains scattering across the void. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Drake didn't join in. The Phoenix was still in danger, its hull riddled with breaches and its systems failing. "We're not out of this yet," he said, his voice cutting through the celebration. Get us out of here, Rios. The Phoenix limped away from the wreckage of the dreadnought, its engines sputtering as it struggled to stay in one piece. The crew worked frantically to repair the damage, but the ship was on its last legs. We've got company, Kara said, her voice tense as she studied the tactical display. More Dominion ships closing fast. Drake's heart sank. The Phoenix had taken down a dreadnought, but it had come at a cost. The ship was in no condition to face another fight. We need to buy some time, he said, his mind racing. Kara, can we rig the wreckage to explode? Kara's eyes lit up. If we overload the power core, we could create a chain reaction. It might give us enough cover to escape. Do it, Drake ordered. The crew worked quickly, rerouting power to the Phoenix's core and setting it to overload. The ship shuddered as the core began to destabilize, its energy building to dangerous levels. Core overload in progress, Kara reported. We've got 2 minutes before it blows. Rios, get us out of here, Drake said. The Phoenix surged forward, its engine straining as it raced away from the wreckage. Behind them, the Dominion ships closed in, their weapons charging as they prepared to finish off the human vessel. They're locking on, Kara warned. Hold steady, Drake said, his eyes fixed on the view screen. Just a little longer. The Phoenix reached the edge of the wreckage as the core reached critical mass. The resulting explosion was blinding, a massive fireball that consumed the Dominion ships and sent shockwaves rippling through the void. The Phoenix was thrown forward by the blast, its hull groaning under the strain. Warning lights flashed across the bridge and the air grew thick with smoke. We're losing power, Taurus shouted. Engines are failing. Hold it together, Drake said, his voice steady despite the chaos. We're not done yet. As the Phoenix drifted through the void, its systems failing one by one, a new transmission crackled over the comms. It was faint, barely audible over the static, but the words sent a chill through Drake's spine. This is the Resolute? We're still here. If anyone can hear this, we need help. Drake's heart sank. The Resolute was still out there, and if the Dominion found them before the Phoenix could intervene, it would be a massacre. Set a course for the Resolute's last known coordinates, he ordered. We're not done yet. The Phoenix surged forward, its engines roaring as it raced to save the last remnants of humanity. The Phoenix limped through the void, its patchwork hull barely holding together. The explosion from the Dominion wreckage had bought them some time, but the ship was on its last legs. Warning lights flickered across the bridge, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning circuitry. Captain Alex Drake stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Resolute's last known coordinates were just ahead, but so was something else. A massive Dominion fleet, their ships forming a blockade around the crippled colony vessel. They've found them, Drake muttered, his voice heavy with dread. And they're not letting go. The Resolute was adrift, its hull scarred and broken, its engines dark. The Dominion ships circled it like vultures, their weapons trained on the defenseless vessel. It was a grim sight, but Drake refused to look away. We can't take on that fleet head-on, said Lieutenant Caravas, her voice tense. Even with the hybrid cannons, we're outgunned 10-1. Drake nodded, his mind racing. The Phoenix was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. They needed a plan, something the Dominion wouldn't see coming. What if we don't fight them head-on? He said, a spark of determination in his eyes. What if we make them think we're something we're not? The crew turned to him, their faces a mix of confusion and hope. Kara, can we modify the Phoenix's transponder to mimic a Dominion signal? He asked. Kara frowned then nodded. It's risky, but yeah. We've got enough of their tech to make it work. Why? Drake's lips curled into a grim smile. Because we're going to bluff our way in. The Phoenix powered down its weapons and activated the modified transponder, broadcasting a Dominion identification signal. To the enemy fleet, it would appear as one of their own, a damaged but functional warship returning to the fold. Here goes nothing, Drake muttered as the Phoenix approached the blockade. The Dominion ships hailed them almost immediately. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose. Drake took a deep breath, then activated the comms. This is Captain Vrax of the Dominion warship Eternal Conqueror. We've engaged the human remnants and sustained heavy damage. Requesting permission to dock for repairs. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Drake thought they'd been discovered. Then the response came. Permission granted, Eternal Conqueror. Proceed to docking Bay 7. The crew let out a collective breath, but Drake knew the hardest part was yet to come. The Phoenix slipped through the blockade, its crew holding their breath as they passed within spitting distance of the Dominion ships. The docking bay loomed ahead, a massive hangar carved into the side of a Dominion carrier. "Once we're inside we'll have one shot at this," Drake said, his voice low and steady. "We need to disable the carrier systems and create enough chaos to give the Resolute a chance to escape." The crew nodded, their faces grim but determined. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. The Phoenix docked with the carrier, its hull groaning as it settled into place. The crew moved quickly, donning Dominion armor salvaged from the wreckage of their previous battles. To the untrained eye, they would look like just another group of Dominion soldiers. "Remember," Drake said as they prepared to disembark. "Stick to the plan. No heroics. We get in, we disable their systems, and we get out." The crew nodded, and Drake led the way into the carrier. The interior of the Dominion carrier was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and flickering lights. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone, and the distant hum of machinery echoed through the walls. Drake and his team moved quickly, their stolen armor hiding them from the occasional patrols of Dominion soldiers. They reached the carrier's control room without incident, but the real challenge was just beginning. The control room was a hive of activity, filled with Dominion technicians and officers monitoring the blockade. Drake's team slipped inside, their weapons at the ready. "On my mark," Drake whispered, his hand hovering over the detonator for the EMP charges they'd planted throughout the carrier. The team nodded, their eyes fixed on the Dominion officers. Now. The EMP charges detonated, sending a pulse of energy through the carrier's systems. The lights flickered and died, the consoles going dark as the ship's power grid collapsed. Chaos erupted as the Dominion officers scrambled to restore power, but Drake's team was already moving. They hacked into the carrier systems, overriding the controls and sending a signal to the Resolute. "This is Captain Drake of the Phoenix," Drake said over the comms. "We've disabled the carrier systems. Get your engines online and get out of here. We'll cover you." The Resolute's response was immediate. "Understood, Phoenix. And, thank you." The Resolute's engines flared to life, the crippled colony vessel slowly pulling away from the blockade. The Dominion ships, their systems still recovering from the EMP pulse, were slow to react. But the Dominion wasn't done yet. The carrier's backup systems came online, and the Dominion officers realized what had happened. Alarms blared, and the carrier's weapons began to power up. "We've got to go now," Drake shouted, leading his team back to the Phoenix. They fought their way through the carrier's corridors, their stolen armor no longer enough to hide them from the enraged Dominion soldiers. The Phoenix was waiting for them, its engines already spooling up as they boarded. "Get us out of here," Drake ordered as the ship detached from the carrier. The Phoenix surged forward, its hybrid cannons firing at the carrier's weapons batteries. The Dominion ships, their systems still recovering, were slow to respond, but the carrier wasn't going down without a fight. A massive energy beam lanced out from the carrier, striking the Phoenix's hull and tearing through the patchwork plating. The ship shuddered violently, warning lights flashing across the bridge. "Hull breach on deck 5, shouted Ensign Elena Torres. "We're losing power." Drake clenched his teeth. "Kara, target their engines. We need to buy the Resolute more time." The hybrid cannons fired again, their energy blasts slamming into the carrier's engines and causing a chain reaction of explosions. The carrier listed to one side, its systems failing as it drifted helplessly in the void. But the victory was short-lived. The rest of the Dominion fleet was closing in, their weapons trained on the Phoenix. "We're not going to make it," Kara said, her voice heavy with despair. Drake's eyes narrowed. "We're not done yet." The Phoenix hung in the void, its patchwork hull battered and broken, its systems barely holding together. The Dominion fleet closed in, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Captain Alex Drake stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Resolute was still struggling to escape, its engines sputtering as it limped away from the blockade. "We've got one last play," Drake said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Kara, prepare the Singularity Core." The crew froze, their faces pale. The Singularity Core was the Phoenix's most dangerous, and most experimental, piece of technology. It was a weapon of last resort, capable of generating a miniature black hole that could tear apart anything in its path. But using it would almost certainly destroy the Phoenix as well. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Kara asked, her voice trembling. "If we activate the core, there's no coming back." Drake met her gaze, his expression resolute. "We knew this day might come. If this is how we go out, we're taking as many of them with us as we can." The crew nodded, their fear giving way to determination. They had come too far to back down now. The Phoenix's engines roared to life, the ship surging forward to meet the Dominion fleet head-on. The hybrid cannons fired, their energy blasts tearing through the enemy ships, but the Dominion's numbers were overwhelming. Plasma beams and missiles streaked through the void, slamming into the Phoenix's hull and sending shockwaves through the ship. Singularity core charging, Kara reported, her hands flying across the console. 10%, 20%, 30%. The Phoenix shuddered violently as another barrage struck its hull, the patchwork plating buckling under the strain. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and the air grew thick with the acrid smell of burning circuitry. "Hull integrity at 40%, shouted Ensign Marcus Rios. "We're not going to last much longer." Drake clenched his teeth. "Hold it together, people. We just need a little more time." The Resolute was almost clear of the blockade, its engine straining as it limped toward the safety of open space. But the Dominion fleet was closing in, their weapons trained on the crippled colony vessel. "Captain, they're targeting the Resolute," Kara warned. Drake's heart sank. If the Dominion destroyed the Resolute, everything they had fought for would be for nothing. "Divert all power to the forward shields," he ordered. "We're going to give them cover." The Phoenix surged forward, its battered hull absorbing the brunt of the Dominion's fire. The ship's shields flickered and died, but they bought the Resolute enough time to escape. "Singularity core at 80%. Kara shouted. "Almost there." The Phoenix was falling apart, its hull riddled with breaches and its systems failing one by one. But the crew refused to give up. 90%, 95%, 100%. Singularity core charged and ready to fire. Drake took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the Dominion fleet. "Do it." The Singularity core activated, its energy building to a crescendo. The Phoenix's hull groaned under the strain, the patchwork plating buckling as the core's power threatened to tear the ship apart. A blinding light erupted from the Phoenix, a swirling vortex of energy that consumed everything in its path. The Dominion ships were caught in the gravitational pull, their hulls twisting and collapsing as they were dragged into the Singularity. The Phoenix itself was not spared. The ship's hull began to disintegrate, its systems failing as the Singularity consumed it from within. Drake stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the Dominion fleet was torn apart. He felt no fear, only a sense of grim satisfaction. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Dominion that would be felt across the galaxy. "It's been an honor," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The Singularity consumed the Phoenix, its light fading as the ship was torn apart. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy was forever changed. The Dominion's fleet had been decimated, their grip on the galaxy weakened. The Resolute escaped, carrying the last remnants of humanity to safety. And the story of the Phoenix spread like wildfire, a tale of defiance and sacrifice that inspired countless others to rise up against the Dominion. Humanity was not extinct. They were a spark, a flame that refused to be extinguished. And in the end, that spark would ignite a fire that would burn across the stars.